Imagine waking up 1 year from today and realizing your life didn't change because of one big mistake. It changed because of thousands of tiny decisions you never noticed you were making. Not the dramatic moments. Not the failures everyone could see. But the quiet choices that slipped past your attention every single day. The extra hour spent scrolling instead of sleeping. The promise to start tomorrow. The workout you skipped because you didn't feel like it. The book that stayed closed. The conversation you kept putting off. None of those decisions seemed important on their own. In fact, they felt almost invisible. But here's the strange thing about life. Small choices don't stay small. They stack. They're like drops of water falling into a bucket. One drop doesn't seem to matter. Neither does the second. Or the 100th. Yet one day, without warning, the bucket overflows. That's how habits work. They quietly shape your future while you're busy living your present. Most people believe success comes from motivation. They wait for the perfect morning, the burst of inspiration, or the feeling that says, "Today is the day." But motivation is like the weather. Some days it's bright and full of energy. Other days it disappears without warning. Habits are different. They don't ask how you feel. They simply show up, day after day, slowly building the life you'll eventually call your own. So let me ask you something. What if the life you've been chasing doesn't require more motivation at all? What if the real problem isn't your lack of discipline, talent, or determination? What if everything you've been trying to change has been focused on the wrong thing? Let's begin by uncovering the invisible force that's already shaping your life, whether you realize it or not. Have you ever reached the end of a year and wondered where all the time went? You started January full of hope. Maybe you promised yourself this would be the year you finally got in shape. Read more books. Saved more money. Started that business. Learned a new skill. Became more patient. More focused. More confident. For a few days, maybe even a few weeks, everything felt different. Then life happened. Work got busy. You got tired. One missed workout became two. One late night became a habit. One excuse quietly turned into another. Before you knew it, you were back where you started, asking yourself the same question you've asked before. Why do I keep ending up in the same place? Most people think the answer is simple. I just need more discipline. I need to want it more. I'm just not consistent enough. But what if that's not the real problem? What if the biggest force shaping your life isn't your motivation, your intelligence, or even your determination? What if it's something so ordinary that you barely notice it's there? That force is your habits. Think about your morning for a moment. Did you consciously decide how to brush your teeth? Which shoe to put on first? Which side of the bed to get out of? Did you carefully think through every step before reaching for your phone? Probably not. You simply did what you've always done. That's because your brain loves efficiency. It's like a skilled driver who knows the road so well that they arrive home without remembering every turn they took. Once a behavior has been repeated enough times, your mind quietly takes it off the list of things that require effort. That's helpful when you're driving or making coffee. It's not so helpful when those automatic behaviors are leading you somewhere you don't want to go. The truth is, much of your day is running on autopilot. And autopilot doesn't care where you're trying to go. It only follows the route you've programmed into it. That's why people often repeat the same year over and over again. The calendar changes, but their routines don't. They expect different results while waking up at the same time, thinking the same thoughts, making the same choices, and responding to the same challenges in exactly the same way. The days feel different. The habits don't. And habits always have the final word. Let me tell you about two friends. We'll call them Daniel and Marcus. Both were 35 years old. Both wanted better health, financial freedom, and a more meaningful life. They talked about their dreams over coffee almost every weekend. If you listened to them, you'd think they were heading toward the same future. But they weren't. Daniel woke up just 20 minutes earlier each morning. He drank a glass of water before reaching for his phone. He read 10 pages of a good book while eating breakfast. 3 evenings a week, he took a 30-minute walk instead of watching another episode of a show he barely cared about. Before bed, he spent 5 minutes writing down what went well that day and what he wanted to improve tomorrow. None of it looked impressive. Marcus, on the other hand, had the same dreams but different routines. He stayed up late scrolling through social media. He skipped breakfast because he was always rushing. He told himself he'd start exercising next Monday. He spent money without tracking where it went. Every evening, he promised himself tomorrow would be different. Tomorrow rarely was. A year later, people started saying something interesting. Daniel is so lucky. Luck had very little to do with it. Daniel hadn't made one giant life-changing decision. He had simply repeated small decisions that quietly accumulated until they became impossible to ignore. Marcus wasn't lazy. He wasn't incapable. He was simply living according to habits that kept carrying him back to the same place. This is where many people become unfair to themselves. They look at the outcome and blame their character. I'm weak. I'm lazy. I never finish what I start. But that's often not true. You've been judging yourself by your results when your habits have been making many of your decisions long before your conscious mind even joined the conversation. That realization changes everything. Because if your habits helped create your current life, new habits can help create a different one. You don't have to become a completely different person overnight. You don't have to wait until Monday, next month, or next year. You don't have to rely on endless motivation. You simply need to interrupt the autopilot and choose a new direction, one small action at a time. Here's the beautiful part. Your future isn't built in dramatic moments. It's built in ordinary ones. In the decision to stand up instead of staying seated. To read one page instead of none. To make one healthy meal instead of another unhealthy one. To speak kindly to yourself instead of repeating the same old criticism. These moments seem insignificant. Until they aren't. Because every habit is like placing one brick. One brick doesn't look like a house. But keep laying bricks in the same direction, day after day, and eventually you'll have something strong enough to stand in for the rest of your life. So stop worrying about changing your entire future today. That's too heavy a burden for anyone to carry. Instead, ask yourself a much smaller question. What can I do in the next 5 minutes that moves me one step closer to the person I want to become? Because changing your life doesn't begin with changing your future. It begins with changing your next 5 minutes. Have you ever watched a motivational video that made you feel like you could conquer the world? For a few minutes, everything seemed possible. You were ready to wake up at 5 in the morning. Eat healthy. Exercise every day. Finish that book. Build that business. Become the person you've always imagined. Then the next morning arrived. The alarm rang. Your bed felt warmer than your dreams. And suddenly, all that motivation had disappeared. If you've ever experienced that, you're not alone. In fact, you're perfectly normal. The biggest lie we've been taught about success is that motivated people accomplish more than everyone else. It sounds convincing, but it isn't true. Motivation is an emotion, and emotions are like waves in the ocean. Sometimes they're strong and powerful. Other times they're barely noticeable. You can't expect a wave to stay at its highest point forever, just as you can't expect yourself to feel excited every single day. The problem is that many people build their plans around emotions instead of routines. They say, I'll exercise when I feel motivated. I'll start writing when inspiration comes. I'll save money when life becomes less stressful. But emotions don't keep appointments. They come and go without asking your permission. Habits, on the other hand, don't care how you feel. They simply ask one question. Is this what we normally do? Imagine two people who both decide to join a gym. On the first day, they're equally excited. They buy new workout clothes, take pictures of their fresh start, and promise themselves that this time will be different. For the first week, both show up every day. Then real life begins. One morning it's raining. Another day they're tired from work. Then a family obligation comes up. A stressful week follows. Before long, excuses start sounding reasonable. The first person skips one workout. Then another. Eventually, they stop going altogether because they no longer feel motivated. The second person has those same feelings. They're tired too. They'd rather stay home too. They don't enjoy every workout. But they go anyway. Not because they're stronger. Not because they have more willpower. Because going to the gym has become part of who they are. It's what they do. There's an important difference between those two people. One depends on motivation. The other depends on habit. Now think about a student preparing for a difficult exam. One student studies only when they feel inspired. Some days they spend hours learning. Other days they do nothing because they're not in the mood. Another student sits down at the same desk every evening at 7 o'clock. Some nights they study for an hour. Some nights only 20 minutes. Some sessions are productive. Others aren't. But they keep showing up. By the time the exam arrives, the second student isn't relying on last-minute panic. They've already done the work. Not because they always wanted to. Because they built a routine that carried them through the days when motivation was nowhere to be found. That's how real progress happens. It's rarely exciting. It's often quiet. Almost boring. But boring is surprisingly powerful. Imagine planting a tree. You don't dig it up every morning to check if it's growing. You water it. You protect it. You trust that something is happening beneath the surface long before you can see it. Habits work the same way. Every time you repeat a positive action, you're strengthening roots that will eventually support a stronger life. Here's something that might surprise you. The people you admire most probably don't wake up every morning overflowing with motivation. The successful entrepreneur doesn't always feel like working. The accomplished writer doesn't always feel creative. The athlete doesn't always want to train. The musician doesn't always want to practice. The difference isn't that they never lose motivation. The difference is that they've stopped expecting motivation to lead the way. They let their habits decide. Over time, something remarkable happens. Actions that once felt difficult begin to feel normal. You don't debate whether to brush your teeth every morning. You simply do it. Not because you're highly motivated to protect your teeth. Because it's become automatic. That's what discipline eventually becomes. People often think discipline means forcing yourself to suffer forever. But that's not really true. Discipline is simply a habit that no longer feels difficult. At first, waking up early feels impossible. Then it feels uncomfortable. Eventually, it just feels like morning. The same thing happens with reading, exercising, saving money, praying, journaling, or practicing a skill. The struggle slowly gives way to familiarity. And that's encouraging, because it means you don't have to fight yourself forever. You only have to stay consistent long enough for the habit to become part of you. So if you've been waiting for the perfect moment, stop. If you've been waiting to feel confident, stop. If you've been waiting for fear to disappear before taking the first step, stop. Read one page. Walk for 10 minutes. Write one paragraph. Save $1. Start before you feel ready. Because readiness isn't something that arrives before action. More often than not, it grows because of action. Every small step whispers the same message to your brain. This is who we are becoming. And before long, you'll realize you no longer need a motivational speech to do what matters. You'll simply begin. But even discipline isn't the greatest force behind lasting change. There is something even more powerful than discipline. Most people have their lives planned backward. They chase results first. I want to lose 20 pounds. I want to make more money. I want to write a book. I want to start a business. I want to be more confident. There's nothing wrong with those goals. In fact, they're good goals. The problem is that goals focus on what you want to have. Real transformation begins with who you choose to become. That's a completely different way of thinking. Imagine you're standing in front of a mirror every morning. You don't just see your reflection. You see the story you've been telling yourself for years. I'm not disciplined. I always quit. I'm terrible with money. I'm just not healthy. Those quiet little sentences may seem harmless, but they're powerful. They become the lens through which you make every decision. If you believe you're someone who always quits, what will you do when life gets difficult? You'll quit. Not because you lack ability. Because your actions are trying to stay consistent with your identity. Here's something fascinating about human nature. We all want our actions to match the person we believe we are. That's why lasting change doesn't begin with changing your schedule. It begins with changing your self-image. Instead of saying, I want to lose weight, try saying, I'm someone who respects my body. Do you hear the difference? The first statement is about a destination. The second is about identity. Someone who respects their body naturally asks different questions. Will this meal give me energy? Should I take a walk today? Do I really need another hour on the couch? Healthy choices stop feeling like punishment. They become expressions of who that person is. The same is true with money. Many people say, I want to be rich. There's nothing wrong with wanting financial freedom. But money is a result, not an identity. A stronger question is this. What kind of person creates lasting value? Someone who creates value keeps learning. They solve problems. They become dependable. They improve their skills. They look for ways to help others instead of searching for shortcuts. Money often follows those habits. Not overnight, but steadily. Think about someone who wants to write a book. If their only goal is to finish a manuscript, they'll probably write only when inspiration strikes. But someone who says, I'm a writer, behaves differently. Writers write. Even on ordinary Tuesdays. Even when the words come slowly. Even when nobody is watching. Their identity pulls them toward action. That's the secret. Every habit is a vote for the person you're becoming. Notice I said a vote, not a final decision. One healthy meal doesn't make you a healthy person. One workout doesn't make you an athlete. One chapter doesn't make you an author. But every repeated action casts another vote. Day after day, those votes begin to tell a story. Imagine an election. One vote rarely decides the outcome. But thousands of votes eventually reveal the winner. Your habits work the same way. Every morning you choose to wake up instead of hitting snooze, you cast a vote for becoming someone who keeps promises. Every time you save a little money instead of spending it impulsively, you cast another vote for becoming financially responsible. Every time you choose kindness instead of anger, patience instead of frustration, learning instead of distraction, you're quietly shaping your identity. The beautiful part is that your past doesn't get the final say. Maybe you've quit before. Maybe you've broken promises to yourself. Maybe you've started and stopped more times than you can count. That doesn't mean you're a quitter. It simply means you've practiced quitting. And if habits can be practiced, so can perseverance. Picture a sculptor standing before a massive block of stone. With every strike of the chisel, nothing seems to happen. The rock looks almost exactly the same. But the sculptor knows something the people watching don't. Every careful strike is removing what doesn't belong. Eventually, the statue appears. Not because of one powerful blow. Because of hundreds of small, patient ones. Your identity is shaped the same way. Every habit chips away at the version of yourself you no longer want to be while revealing the person you've had the potential to become all along. This is why people often fail after reaching a goal. Someone loses weight but still believes they're an unhealthy person. Before long, the old habits return. Someone earns more money but still believes they're careless with finances. The extra income disappears. Someone quits a bad habit but still sees themselves as someone who's controlled by temptation. Eventually, they go back. People don't permanently rise to their goals. They return to their identity. That's why lasting change isn't about forcing yourself to act differently for a few weeks. It's about becoming someone for whom those actions feel natural. So don't ask yourself only, what do I want to achieve? Ask something deeper. Who do I want to become? Then let every small habit become a quiet vote for that person. Because one day you'll wake up and realize you didn't become successful because you reached a goal. You became successful because you became the kind of person who could never stop growing. So here's a question worth carrying with you today, tomorrow, and every day after that. What identity are your habits quietly building every day? If you've ever tried to change your life, you've probably made the same mistake most people make. You tried to change everything at once. A new diet. A new workout plan. Wake up at 5. Read a book every week. Meditate every morning. Drink more water. Spend less money. Learn a new skill. Journal every night. For a few days, it feels exciting. You buy a new notebook. Download a habit tracker. Watch motivational videos. Tell yourself, this time, I'm going to stick with it. Then reality shows up. Life gets busy. You miss one habit, then another. Soon the entire plan falls apart, and you're left wondering why lasting change always seems just out of reach. The problem isn't that you're incapable. The problem is that you've been trying to climb the whole staircase in a single leap. Real change doesn't work that way. It begins with one small step. Let me tell you about Emma. Emma was 32 years old, worked a demanding office job, and constantly felt like she was falling behind. Every time she opened social media, someone seemed to have a better career, a healthier body, or a more organized life. She wanted all of it. So she created the perfect self-improvement plan. She would exercise 6 days a week, read 30 books a year, meditate for 20 minutes every morning, wake up before sunrise, stop eating junk food completely, learn a new language, and save more money. It looked impressive on paper. It lasted exactly 9 days. By the second week, exhaustion had replaced excitement. She skipped one workout, then another. The books stayed on the shelf. Meditation became something she'd start again next Monday. Before long, she gave up entirely. For a while, she believed she simply lacked discipline. But one evening, after talking with an older coworker, she heard a sentence that stayed with her. Don't improve your whole life. Improve one tiny corner of it. At first, it sounded too simple. Almost silly. Could one tiny habit really make a difference? She decided to test it. Instead of reading 30 pages every night, she'd read 1 page. Just one. If she wanted to stop there, she could. There were no complicated rules. No pressure. No guilt. 1 page. Every night. That's it. The first night took less than 2 minutes. The second night was just as easy. By the end of the first week, she had never missed a day. Sometimes she stopped after 1 page. Other nights, she found herself reading 10 or 20 pages because getting started was the hardest part. A month later, something unexpected happened. Reading no longer felt like a task. It felt normal. So she added another tiny habit. 1 push-up every morning. Not 10. Not 50. 1. Again, it sounded almost laughable. But she wasn't trying to build muscles overnight. She was building consistency. Some mornings, that single push-up turned into 5. Other mornings, it stayed at 1. Either way, she had kept the promise she made to herself. Weeks passed. Then she added 1 minute of meditation before bed. Just 60 seconds of sitting quietly and paying attention to her breathing. 1 minute became 3. 3 became 5. Without forcing it, her evenings grew calmer. Months later, Emma looked around and realized something remarkable had happened. She was reading books regularly, exercising several times a week, sleeping better, feeling less anxious, managing her time more wisely. None of those changes had come from one dramatic decision. They had grown from tiny habits that quietly became part of her identity. That's how compound growth works. Most people understand compound interest when it comes to money. Imagine putting a small amount into a savings account every month. The first few months don't look impressive. The balance barely moves. It's tempting to think it isn't working. But as time passes, those small deposits begin earning interest. Then that interest earns interest. Eventually, growth starts accelerating. The same principle applies to your habits. Every positive action is like making a deposit into the person you're becoming. At first, the results seem invisible. But they are accumulating beneath the surface. Think about planting a seed. You don't expect a towering tree the next morning. For days, maybe even weeks, it appears as though nothing is happening. But underground, roots are spreading. Strength is developing where nobody can see it. When the plant finally breaks through the soil, people notice the growth. What they don't notice is all the unseen work that made it possible. Habits grow the same way. The biggest changes in your life usually begin long before anyone notices them. Even brushing your teeth teaches the same lesson. You don't brush once and expect healthy teeth forever. You do it every day. It's such a small action that you barely think about it. Yet over years, those few minutes protect your health in ways that are easy to take for granted. Tiny habits have that kind of quiet power. They're ordinary, almost forgettable. But repeated often enough, they shape extraordinary lives. Here's what many people miss. They think success comes from doing big things. In reality, success often comes from doing small things for a very long time. 1 page, 1 push-up, 1 minute, 1 conversation, 1 healthy choice, 1 promise kept. None of them will change your life today. But together, they'll begin changing the person you see in the mirror. And when that person changes, everything else begins to change too. So don't underestimate the smallest step you can take today. It may look insignificant. It may even feel too easy. That's exactly why it works. Because the smallest habits are rarely the most important. They're simply the easiest to repeat. Most people don't lose their future in one dramatic moment. They lose it quietly. One ordinary day at a time. That's what makes bad habits so dangerous. They're rarely loud enough to scare you. Instead, they whisper. Just 5 more minutes. You deserve a break. You can start tomorrow. It's not a big deal. And because each decision seems so small, it's easy to believe it doesn't matter. Until one day, you look back and wonder how you ended up somewhere you never intended to be. The truth is, Bad habits don't usually ruin your future overnight. They steal it one unnoticed day at a time. Let's start with one habit that has quietly become part of everyday life. Constantly checking your phone. Maybe you've done it today. A notification appears. You unlock your screen. One message becomes 5. 5 minutes become 20. You open one app, then another. Before you know it, you've forgotten what you were about to do. The scary part isn't the time you lose. It's the attention you lose. Every interruption trains your brain to expect distraction. Deep focus becomes harder. Patience becomes weaker. Even moments of silence begin to feel uncomfortable. Your phone isn't the enemy, but unconscious use of it can slowly become one. Then there's the habit almost nobody talks about. Negative self-talk. Imagine having a friend who followed you everywhere, repeating things like, "You're not good enough. You always fail. Why even try?" You probably wouldn't spend much time with that person. Yet many of us speak to ourselves that way every single day. We make one mistake and suddenly it's proof that we're incapable. We compare ourselves to someone else's highlight reel and decide we'll never measure up. Words matter, especially the ones you say to yourself. Your mind listens, even when you're joking. Another habit that quietly drains your energy is complaining. Now, let's be clear. There's a difference between honestly expressing frustration and living in a constant state of complaint. One looks for solutions. The other searches for more problems. The more you complain, the more your brain becomes skilled at finding things to complain about. It's like adjusting the focus on a camera. Point it toward what's broken, and eventually that's all you'll notice. But point it toward opportunities, lessons, and gratitude, and your perspective begins to change. Not because life suddenly becomes easier. Because you've trained your mind to notice different things. Then comes procrastination. Perhaps the most convincing liar of them all. Procrastination rarely says, "Don't do it." Instead, it says, "Do it later." Tomorrow sounds harmless. Until tomorrow becomes next week. Next week becomes next month. And suddenly years have passed. Dreams don't disappear because people stop caring. They disappear because people keep delaying. Here's something worth remembering. The cost of procrastination isn't measured only in lost time. It's measured in lost confidence. Every promise you break to yourself quietly weakens the trust you have in yourself. The opposite is also true. Every promise you keep, no matter how small, strengthens that trust. Then there's late-night scrolling. It often begins with good intentions. I'll just check one thing before bed. But the endless stream of videos, news, and updates has no natural finish line. An hour disappears. Your sleep suffers. The next morning you're tired. When you're tired, you make poorer decisions. You skip the workout. You crave unhealthy food. You lose patience more quickly. One late night quietly influences the entire next day. Finally, there's the habit of avoiding difficult conversations. Maybe it's telling someone they've hurt you. Maybe it's apologizing. Maybe it's setting a boundary. Or admitting you've made a mistake. Avoidance feels comfortable in the moment. But comfort has a price. Problems left unspoken rarely disappear. They usually grow. A small misunderstanding becomes resentment. A minor issue becomes a major conflict. Courage isn't the absence of discomfort. It's the willingness to face it before it grows. Now, after hearing all of this, you might think the answer is simple. I just need stronger willpower. But here's the surprising truth. Willpower is helpful. Environment is stronger. Imagine placing a bowl of fresh fruit on your kitchen table and hiding cookies in a cabinet on the highest shelf. Without thinking, you'll probably eat more fruit. Not because you've suddenly become more disciplined, because the better choice became easier. Now imagine the opposite. Cookies are sitting on the counter. Fresh fruit is buried in the back of the refrigerator. Which one will you reach for after a long, exhausting day? Usually, the one that's easiest to grab. Your environment quietly shapes your behavior long before your willpower has a chance to speak. Want to read more? Leave a book on your pillow. Want to drink more water? Keep a bottle on your desk. Want to spend less time on your phone? Charge it across the room instead of beside your bed. Want to exercise? Lay out your workout clothes the night before. Small changes to your surroundings remove unnecessary decisions. And every unnecessary decision drains mental energy. Successful people don't always have stronger willpower. Many simply build environments that make good choices easier and bad choices inconvenient. Think of your environment as the current in a river. You can swim against it for a while, but eventually you'll get tired. It's much wiser to change the direction of the current. When your surroundings support the person you're trying to become, progress feels lighter, more natural, more sustainable. Take a moment and picture your home. Look at your desk, your kitchen, your bedroom, your phone screen, your calendar. They're all sending you messages. Some encourage growth. Others encourage distraction. Every object around you is quietly inviting a behavior. The question is whether that behavior is leading you toward the life you want or away from it. You don't need to redesign your entire life tonight. Just change one thing. Move one distraction out of sight. Put one good habit where you can't miss it. Make the better choice the easier choice. Because sometimes the biggest breakthrough doesn't come from changing yourself. It comes from changing what surrounds you. And that leaves us with one final question. What if your home has been deciding your future more than your motivation? There will be days when you don't feel like it. Days when you're tired, busy, discouraged. Days when the alarm feels louder than your ambition and your couch seems far more inviting than your goals. Those days matter more than the easy ones. Because anyone can take action when they're excited. The real question is this. Who are you when the excitement is gone? That's where lasting change is built. Not on your best days, but on your ordinary ones. Many people believe success belongs to the people who work the hardest for a short period of time. But look closely at almost anyone who has achieved something meaningful, and you'll notice a different pattern. They kept showing up. Again. And again. And again. Not perfectly. Just consistently. One of the most helpful ideas you can carry with you is incredibly simple. Never miss twice. You'll have bad days. Everyone does. You'll skip a workout. You'll eat something you didn't plan to eat. You'll forget to read. You'll stay up too late. That's life. The mistake isn't missing once. The mistake is convincing yourself that one missed day means you failed. It doesn't. Imagine you're driving across the country. If you take one wrong turn, you don't abandon the entire trip. You simply get back on the right road. Your habits deserve the same grace. Miss once if you must. Just don't miss twice. That second miss day is where a habit begins to disappear. The first miss is an accident. The second starts becoming a pattern. People who succeed aren't people who never fall off track. They're people who return quickly. That's the difference. Let's talk about consistency. It doesn't look impressive. In fact, from the outside, it can seem almost boring. Reading 10 pages every day doesn't make headlines. Saving a small amount of money every week isn't exciting. Taking a 20-minute walk after dinner doesn't seem extraordinary. But consistency has a quiet kind of power. Imagine filling a bucket with a single cup of water each day. On the first day, it barely looks different. After a week, you still might wonder if it's worth the effort. But keep pouring. Eventually, the bucket fills. Not because you poured faster. Because you never stopped pouring. Life rewards that kind of patience. Many people chase intensity instead. They work out for 3 hours on Saturday. Then do nothing for the next 2 weeks. They study all night before an exam instead of learning a little every day. They save money for 1 month, then spend impulsively the next. Intensity feels productive. Consistency is productive. There's a big difference. Here's something else that's easy to overlook. Celebrate small wins. We often wait until we've reached the finish line before allowing ourselves to feel proud. But if the finish line is months, or even years away, you'll spend a long time feeling like you're failing. Instead, celebrate the habit. Finished 1 page? That's a win. Went for a walk even though you didn't feel like it? That's a win. Chose water instead of soda? Another win. Kept a promise to yourself? Celebrate it. Not because the action was huge. Because every small victory strengthens your belief that you're becoming someone who follows through. Confidence doesn't appear before action. It grows because of repeated action. Now let's talk about momentum. Have you ever watched a freight train begin to move? At first, it looks almost impossible. The engine strains. The wheels turn slowly. Every inch requires enormous effort. But something changes after a while. The train begins to roll. Then it gathers speed. Eventually, it moves with such steady force that stopping it becomes far more difficult than starting it. Your habits work exactly the same way. The beginning is the hardest part. The first workout. The first chapter. The first week of waking up earlier. The first month of saving money. Everything feels heavy because you're pushing against old routines that have been in place for years. But every time you show up, you're adding a little more momentum. One day, you'll notice something surprising. The thing that once felt difficult begins to feel natural. You no longer argue with yourself about whether to exercise. You simply put on your shoes. You no longer debate whether to read before bed. You reach for your book almost without thinking. That's momentum at work. People often call this discipline. But it feels much lighter than people imagine. You're no longer forcing yourself every single day. You're simply continuing what you've already started. And that's why showing up matters so much. Every time you keep going, even when the effort feels small, you're making tomorrow a little easier. Think back to a time when you brushed your teeth every day for a month. Did you have to negotiate with yourself every morning? Probably not. The habit carried you. That's what we're aiming for in every area of life. Not endless struggle. Automatic consistency. Here's the truth that many people never hear. Success isn't spectacular. It isn't one perfect moment that changes everything. It isn't one lucky break. It isn't one burst of motivation. Success is repetitive. It's choosing the same worthwhile actions long after the excitement has faded. It's showing up when no one is applauding. It's trusting that today's small effort is preparing tomorrow's opportunity. The world often celebrates dramatic victories. But those victories are almost always built on thousands of quiet decisions that nobody saw. So if you're tempted to quit because today's progress seems too small, remember this. The goal isn't to impress people. The goal is to become the kind of person who keeps showing up. Because those ordinary days eventually create extraordinary lives. And while consistency is one of the greatest forces behind success, there is one habit that almost every truly successful person shares. It's simple. It's powerful. And it changes everything else. Imagine trying to improve at a game you've never bothered to keep score in. You play every day. You work hard. You hope you're getting better. But because you never look at the scoreboard, you have no idea whether you're improving or simply repeating the same mistakes. That's how many people live their lives. They're busy. They're trying. They're making an effort. But they rarely stop long enough to ask one simple question. How am I actually doing? That question changes everything. If there's one habit that quietly strengthens every other habit, it's this. Self-reflection. Not judgment. Not guilt. Not replaying your mistakes over and over again. Just honest reflection. At the end of each day, before your head touches the pillow, pause for a few minutes and ask yourself 3 simple questions. What worked today? What didn't? What will I improve tomorrow? That's it. No complicated system. No expensive planner. No perfect words. Just a quiet conversation with yourself. The first question matters because your brain naturally pays more attention to what's wrong than to what's right. Maybe you kept your morning walk. Maybe you stayed patient during a stressful meeting. Maybe you drank more water than usual or finally finished a chapter of the book you've been meaning to read. Those wins deserve to be noticed. When you acknowledge progress, no matter how small, you remind yourself that you're moving forward. The second question is just as important. What didn't work today? This isn't an invitation to criticize yourself. It's an opportunity to become curious. Instead of saying, I have no discipline, ask, why did I skip my workout? Maybe you went to bed too late. Maybe your workout clothes weren't ready. Maybe your schedule was unrealistic. Notice the difference. One response attacks your character. The other searches for a solution. Growth begins the moment you stop asking, what's wrong with me? And start asking, what can I learn from this? Then comes the third question. What will I improve tomorrow? Not next month. Not next year. Tomorrow. Keep the answer small. I'll leave my book on my pillow. I'll put my phone across the room before bed. I'll prepare tomorrow's lunch tonight. Small adjustments repeated daily create extraordinary results. Think of a pilot flying across the ocean. The airplane almost never travels in a perfectly straight line. Wind pushes it off course. Weather forces small detours. Yet the pilot doesn't panic every time the plane drifts. Instead, they make tiny corrections throughout the journey. By continually adjusting the course, they still arrive at the right destination. Life works the same way. You don't need to be perfect. You simply need to keep correcting your direction. One of the easiest ways to do that is through journaling. Now, don't let that word intimidate you. Your journal doesn't have to be beautiful. It doesn't have to be filled with long, thoughtful paragraphs. It can be as simple as a few sentences. Today I kept my promise to exercise. I spent too much time on my phone. Tomorrow I'll leave my phone in another room while I work. That's enough. Over time, those small notes become something incredibly valuable. They become a map. Patterns begin to appear. You notice that you're more productive after a good night's sleep. You realize you're more likely to skip healthy meals when you're stressed. You discover that reading before bed helps you sleep better than scrolling through social media. These aren't random discoveries. They're clues. And the more clues you collect, the better you understand yourself. Another powerful habit is planning tomorrow before today ends. Most people wake up and then decide what they're going to do. That sounds harmless. But every decision you postpone until morning costs mental energy. Instead, take 5 minutes each evening to decide your most important priorities. Lay out your clothes. Prepare your workspace. Write down your top 3 tasks. When morning comes, you won't waste precious energy wondering where to begin. You'll already know. Tracking your habits can help too. Not because you need to become obsessed with checking boxes, but because what gets noticed often gets improved. Imagine trying to save money without ever looking at your bank account, or trying to lose weight without paying attention to what you eat. Awareness creates change. What remains invisible rarely improves. What becomes visible becomes manageable. This is why people who reflect often improve faster than everyone else. They aren't necessarily smarter. They aren't always more talented. They simply notice patterns that others ignore. They see what drains their energy. They recognize what gives them momentum. They make small corrections before small problems become big ones. Little by little, they build a life that looks effortless from the outside. But it was never effortless. It was intentional. As we come to the end of this journey together, I want you to remember something. You don't need a perfect plan. You don't need extraordinary talent. You don't need endless motivation. You need awareness. Because awareness is the doorway to change. The moment you begin paying attention to your habits, you stop being controlled by them. You become their architect instead. And that's where real freedom begins. One honest question. One small adjustment. One better choice at a time. Because when you master the habit of reflecting, every other habit becomes easier to improve. You stop living on autopilot. You begin living on purpose. And eventually, something beautiful happens. Master your habits. And eventually, you stop chasing the life you want. You wake up living it. Let's go back to where we began. I asked you to imagine waking up 1 year from today and realizing your life didn't change because of one big mistake. It changed because of thousands of tiny decisions you never noticed you were making. Now, I'd like you to imagine something different. Imagine waking up 1 year from today feeling stronger, calmer, healthier, more confident, and more in control of your life. Not because you discovered a secret. Not because you got lucky. Not because life suddenly became easy. But because you kept making one small choice after another. That's how real change happens. Quietly. Patiently. One day at a time. We've talked about habits, motivation, identity, consistency, and self-reflection. We discovered that motivation comes and goes, but habits stay. We learned that your identity shapes your actions, and your actions strengthen your identity. We saw that the smallest habits often create the biggest transformations because they're easy to repeat. And we learned that success isn't built through perfection. It's built by showing up, learning, adjusting, and continuing even after imperfect days. If there's one lesson I hope you carry with you after listening to this audiobook, it's this. No one changes overnight. We love stories about overnight success because they're exciting. But real life usually tells a quieter story. A remarkable life doesn't begin with one dramatic moment. It begins with one decision. One habit. One repeated action. Think about a mason building a house. They don't arrive with a finished home. They lay one brick. Then another. Some days they make visible progress. Other days, it feels slow. But they keep building because they understand something important. A house is never created by one brick. It's created by thousands of carefully placed bricks, each one supporting the next. Your habits work exactly the same way. Every healthy meal is a brick. Every page you read is a brick. Every promise you keep to yourself is a brick. Every difficult conversation you choose to have instead of avoiding is a brick. Individually, they seem small. Together, they build a life. So here's my challenge for you. Don't leave this audiobook determined to change everything by tomorrow morning. That almost never works. Instead, choose one habit. Just one. Maybe it's reading one page before bed. Maybe it's taking a 10-minute walk after dinner. Maybe it's writing down 3 things you're grateful for each evening. Maybe it's putting your phone away 30 minutes before you sleep. Whatever you choose, make it small enough that you can't talk yourself out of it. Then protect it. Treat it like a promise to someone you deeply care about. Because you do. That person is your future self. Repeat that habit tomorrow. Then the day after. And the day after that. There will be days when you miss. That's okay. Remember what we learned. Never miss twice. Keep coming back. Keep laying bricks. Keep becoming the person your habits are quietly shaping. And then do something that most people struggle to do. Be patient. We live in a world that celebrates instant results. But the greatest things in life take time. A tree doesn't rush to grow. A river doesn't hurry to reach the sea. And the strongest character is never built in a single day. Trust the process. Trust the small steps. Trust the quiet work that nobody else can see. One day, you'll look around and realize your confidence feels different. Your relationships feel stronger. Your mind feels clearer. Your future feels brighter. Not because of one extraordinary moment, but because ordinary moments, repeated with intention, became extraordinary over time. Before we finish, I'd love to hear from you. Leave a comment below and answer this question. What's the one habit you're going to start today? Writing it down is more than a comment. It's a commitment. And your decision might inspire someone else who's beginning this journey too. If this audiobook encouraged you, gave you a new perspective, or reminded you that lasting change is possible, please take a moment to like this video, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe to the channel for more self-help audiobooks designed to help you build a better mind, stronger habits, and a more meaningful life. Thank you for spending this time with me. I truly hope these words stay with you long after this audiobook ends. And always remember, your future isn't waiting somewhere ahead of you. It's being built by the choices you make today. Every small habit is a brick. Every repeated action is a promise to your future self. Master your habits, and one day you'll look back and realize you didn't just change your routine, you changed your life.